Welcome back to my channel, and I am the host of this channel, Lynn Marie. Hello, and welcome if you're new, and welcome back if you're old. And I just want to say I'm super grateful for everybody that watches, because this has been inconsistent for me for a very, very long time. And it's because I myself had to fight my own demons, insecurities, and do the inner work that I talk about on this channel. I guess to make me an expert because I really went through it. And so it was really hard for me to be here. And so I appreciate it. And here we go with today. We are going to be talking about lost in translation. How do we understand that everybody was created as fractals? Let's just think of like how if we were all one like this and then we exploded like the Big Bang, right? And we were all of these lights, and we're all looking at the center now from this point of view, but we're all just off a little bit, right? And so we are the perception fractal, and we were never meant to see things exactly identically the same as others. We will gravitate to the people in these fractals that are closest to our perception, right? They call that like soul groups. And then the ones that are on the opposite end of the spectrum of seeing would be, you know, the polar opposite, and they would be the most challenging. And so what I found in coaching is almost also contracts. If you look at their astrology and, you know, their traumas and their triggers, they're almost always polar opposites, and they're the ones that really antagonize us the most. But why? Because we're meant to go back here. So these people over here that aren't pushing us in our perceptions to open up to understanding and accepting all perceptions so that we can get whole again and stop saying in dissonance and fractals that don't try to merge with the wholeness of consciousness, become a Holy Spirit. And so these soul contracts are polarized to help us learn to accept all perceptions without letting it trigger us in trying to change things. We're going to have to just talk about the elephant in the room before I get to this video, and that is everything's perfect. The yin yang of the universe is perfect. If I didn't go through a narcissist, I wouldn't have been able to see clearly what that perception is, accept it, and not let it mess with me. If I didn't have a traumatizing childhood, especially in school, I might have been more indoctrinated in those things, and I wouldn't have been able to go and be a metaphysician. If I hadn't been homeless in the city that doesn't care about homelessness, I wouldn't have grown up to understand and have empathy for homelessness. I grew up in an area that wasn't as wealthy as the area I moved to in the West Coast. In that West Coast, towns had I can't even describe to you how much homelessness, and they didn't care. They weren't doing anything. It was just a whole bunch of lip service. So me experiencing that now, I see everything in the dark that we have in our lives is perfect. Stop pushing against it. Start to dive into it and say, what would this have been for? So I could understand those polarities of people that don't care about homelessness, right? Not to fight them, but just to understand what I can become more in my understanding and awareness of why people don't care about homelessness, and how maybe I can engage them to understand from my point of view. But see, this is the issue, and that's why we're talking about this. We don't do it in a way to come to wholeness with others. We do it in a way to stay in separation. So what that means is we're not saying it as, I understand your point. can you understand my point so that we can merge the 2 points and come to raising in consciousness, or going back to one conscious field with all fractals existing, right? They talk about you're the whole ocean, but you forgot and think you're a drop. Okay, so this whole ocean is one thing. All perceptions are included. And the merging of those perceptions is what this whole channel is about. But let's just talk about the distortions so that we can understand this more, because we need that. We learn through contrast. And so what I'd like to help you understand is things being lost in translation within ourselves can help us understand how it's lost in translation with others, and maybe not get so freaking triggered by other people's perceptions. Because if we understand it in this way, maybe we can stop that separation consciousness and get more into wholeness. Because that's all it is. It's just a shift in understanding every time, every belief, everything, every trigger. It's, okay, what is this teaching me about a belief that I can shift to understanding and acceptance, as opposed to rejection and separation, which causes arguing or negative reactions versus positive response. So let's get to it. Did you ever play telephone when you were a kid? Yeah. The reason why that game's so fun and interesting, and I feel like Spirit had set it up for us to learn that as a kid, so as we got older we understood. But I want to use that as the example. Let's say I started the telephone and I said, this guy really truly loves her, but she doesn't know how to feel love. So I pass the message on to the next person. Now let's just say that their perception, because the way that they view things is so different than mine. You could understand it, right? But then when she heard it, the next person, she might have understood it as the guy loves her, but that girl doesn't love him, right? So two very, very different things. This is also how I teach about the Bible translations. We can't truly know until we feel the Spirit, and I'll get to that. But so because of my perception, I was like, the guy feels love for her, but she doesn't know how to feel love, so she doesn't know how to love him back. It's not that she doesn't want to love him, or she's not attracted to him, or she's not in a relationship with him. It's she doesn't know how. But the next person took it as, this guy's madly in love with her and she doesn't love him back. And then so if she sends that on to the next person would change that. And by the time you get to the end, it could come through as the guy is madly in love with her, obsessive stalker tendencies, and she is trying to resist that, and she's running away, she's getting restraining orders. I mean, it could go all the way. But I'm just using this as an example so you can understand, if we're all in different understandings, when we see the same thing happening in reality, we're all going to see a different thing. That's why they say no witnesses tell the same story. Because it's based in what we believe certain things to be. Talk about language a lot, so you can understand that through cultural differences as well when we're translating words. Like, how do we do that from Spanish or European languages to English? We have one word for love, and they have so many variants to help you understand those feelings and how they relate to a certain circumstance. Not the same love overall. Is it romantic love for my kids? No. But this is just to help you understand, like, even language is distortions. It's very distorted. Just to help you understand that we're never going to understand, comprehend, and see things the same, ever. Okay? So the real question is how do we find unity in that difference, as opposed to separation and arguing for my way versus your way? Because that's all it is. And if you really understand what I'm pointing out here, is we're meant to be different. We're meant to perceive different. We're meant to have different things. Some of us have strong Neptunes in our chart, and I really tried to not use too much you know, astrology, tarot, things like that, even though that's my language in a lot of ways. But just to understand, if you have a strong Neptune in your chart, Neptunian influence can be illusion, but it can also be the highest potential for spirituality. So, I mean, even in that, when the planets and who dominates your chart, they have lower expressions and higher expressions. So it's just really, are we using our lower mind or our higher mind? Are we using our cultural mind? Or are we using our soul mind? And so the goal here is, if we can alchemize enough of our cultural beliefs, ego, and get more in tune with our soul, we would actually appreciate and accept others and their different ways of viewing the world, and be like, wow, that's super interesting. That is not the way I saw it. We can make it like fun. But we're not there because our ego wants us to feel safe in, I'm right, you're wrong. Again, going back to shame is the biggest thing of the ego, because I'd feel ashamed if you told me your way and I felt differently, because you shamed me for it. And then you activate my shame, so I'm going to shame you for it. And there's separation, folks. So it's quite interesting how these energies can play into our beliefs, right? How these emotions, even if we're triggered, we can have different beliefs than when we're in a state of peace. So to try to push against everybody in the reality for the way that they think, feel, and believe is the circuit. So how do we get into starting to really get into this unity consciousness, where we're not doing this me against you consciousness, separation? How do we get into that? Well, just remember, we just have to kind of accept within ourselves and let the universe provide us with the triggers to understand the beliefs and kind of neutralize them, alchemy, right? To get to the place where we can just be more accepting of other people's views. So it's really always about alchemizing the ego patterns and reactions, and getting more in depth with your soul, which feels like joy, peace, love. And then you won't do that. It's just natural byproduct. And if you think the universe isn't in control of this, so we can surrender, try getting out of your soul contract that's trying to teach you this. Soul contracts are always the opposite perception, to help us recognize, because the first thing we do in one of those polarizing soul contracts is try to tell them about themselves and what they're doing wrong and how they're perceiving the reality wrong, and you're a narcissist, or you're an ass, or you're an ego freak, or you're unintelligent. I mean, when we first get triggered by these opposite polarities, which the universe is pushing to help us get into more union, and you first have that experience, you understand it's pure hell. And it's because your ego is fighting your soul, because at the soul level, we are one perception. And at the ego level, we are very far apart. And so that schism, that friction, is what's causing the pain, not the other person. So the solution is, as everything I talk about on this channel, is to sit with your lower emotions and stop giving it power through your reactions and your overthinking, and just try to shift your focus and get back to your soul. The ego wants to debate, the soul wants peace. So keep working on that over and over again, and then you finally get freedom. You're free of it. And then the opposite polarities, people in traffic, bullshit bosses, all of that no longer trigger you. And you're freed. The only thing you want in this reality is to be free of that. And you think arguing for your point of view is going to free you of it. It's just not. So I hope this video helps you understand the distortions in our perception and how we all can become one again. Unity consciousness. Instead of third dimensional consciousness, we want to move to fifth dimensional consciousness. Third dimension is you against me. Fifth dimensional is there is no you or me. We're just all fractals and we're all from the same place, and we just all see things different, and we communicate those differences until we can become whole in our differences. It's really quite the thing to try to describe, and that's what a lot of people like me try to teach, is different ways to describe this to help it spark something in you. So I hope it did. And so that's it for today. I hope it helped that, again, spark something. And until next time, take care.